Once again, ESPN is way too low on Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran member of the national media at Yahoo Sports. Today on the show, we talk about ESPN's college football writers ranking the top 10 coaches in college football, and they include Lane Kiffin. He is better than what they say, though, in this chaos era of college football, and we'll talk all about that. John Macon Gillespie of the Grove Report joins the show to talk about these weird Grove Bowl games. We talk about spring practice, and Chris Beard is going to be staying in Oxford for the foreseeable future. We're excited about that. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Special thanks to the Grove Collective for making the Juice Wells interview happen. Go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. That's why LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions apply. ESPN, did their off-season type comment of trying to basically have all of their college football writers vote on different things around college football, and one of which was the best college football coaches in the nation. Now, this is what they came up with, and we'll do 1 through 10. Number 1 is Kirby Smart. That is a no-duh. He is the best coach in college football. But after that, there's room to argue. Number 2 is Kalen DeBoer. I don't understand that. He hasn't done anything that hasn't been done by Chris Peterson at Washington. And other than being the head coach at Alabama, he doesn't probably belong on this list. Very good football coach. He hasn't warranted this level. Kyle Whittingham, very good. He's turned Utah into a power. He probably belongs up on this list as well. Dabo Swinney in this modern era of college football right now, one of the 4th best college football coach right now. See, right now, the guy that doesn't believe in NIL or transferring and has antiquated recruiting strategies. He's the number 4 college football coach right now. No, that is all based off reputation. Mike Norvell competing with Lane Kiffin for a higher position than much of these guys. Dan Lanning's doing very well. Sarkisian is at Texas doing very well. Lane Kiffin, obviously a star. Lance Leopold, and Ryan Day. Ryan Day probably doesn't belong on this list if we're going to be completely honest about it. Now, if you look at what's going on with, say, Lane Kiffin right now, and ESPN, this is the write-up that they had on Lane Kiffin. And they said it at 48, Kiffin is already in his 5th head coaching stop. He was hired as the Oakland Raiders coach in 2007 when he was 31. And although there were some growing pains along the way, he's developed in one of the more creative and entertaining coaches in all of college football, entering his 5th season at Ole Miss. Can you believe he's been here for 5 years? That's crazy. Kiffin has accomplished things in Oxford that hasn't been done before. The Rebels have won 10 regular season games in 2 of the past 3 seasons, and prior to Kiffin's arrival, they have never won 10 regular season games. Kiffin is renowned as one of the top offensive minds in the game, and his offenses are both balanced and unpredictable. Ole Miss and Alabama are the only 2 teams in the SEC to average 33 or more points each of the last 4 seasons. Kiffin is quick to troll anybody and everybody on social media. That's completely irrelevant, honestly, and is polarizing among rival fan bases. He's still a bit of a lightning rod, but that said, his time working under Saban helped him become one of the more efficient managers of an entire program. Kiffin has also worked the evolving nature of college football to his advantage and scored big in the transfer portal. So this is my point, okay? That last sentence is my point. In this chaos era of college football, which is the era that we're in right now, with NIL, the transfer portal, basically no rules, wild, wild west football. Lane Kiffin has done better than anybody, save maybe Mike Norvell, in navigating it from a minus position. And when I say minus position, Lane Kiffin got to Ole Miss taking over a 4-8 football team. Mike Norvell got to Florida State taking over, I think, a 2-10 football team or something like that. So that's what I mean, like a minus position. In a short period of time, they have elevated them to being in the playoff discussion and being a contender for numerous things that wasn't even thought of 10 years ago. So we'll see how that goes. This era of chaos and all that, Kiffin has thrived in it. Honestly, he knows how to navigate chaos better than most anybody else in college football. The NIL market, the Grove Collective, has become one of the most efficient, best case scenario collectives in college football at the moment. They're a large reason for the success of Ole Miss football, and the idea of the Grove Collective was put together probably by Kiffin's input, in my opinion. Kiffin is an early adopter. He is really quick to handle things in this changing environment. So Ole Miss is the portal king, essentially, with Lane Kiffin and the transfer portal at the moment. They've landed guys like Jackson Dart, Princely Amon-Mielon, Walter Nolan, Trey Harris, Juice Wells, Pooh Paul. There's players all over the place that they've landed through the transfer portal. If you look at Ole Miss's defensive line, just their defensive line, their projected starting 4 going into the fall, all transfers. If you look at their linebackers, their projected starting 2, because I'm going to say 2, it's like 4-2-5, transfers. If you look at the secondary position, people that are projected to be starters on the outside and all that, only one player would probably be projected as a starter that was not a transfer. Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin has dominated that era of college football and put Ole Miss so much on the map to where they're going to be, top 5, top 6 in the country going into next season. This is 5 years removed from some of the worst probation that we've ever seen, and Ole Miss being a 4-8 football team. I mean, it's hard to believe that 5 years ago, we're 5 years away from the Piss and the Miss. We are 5 years away from Elijah Moore handling that. But ESPN and these writers, okay, these writers, God love them, they can't put the blue blood status down. Kalen DeBoer is the coach of Alabama, so we have to automatically elevate him to where he's the coach of Alabama. It's like whoever the quarterback is at USC is going to be a Heisman candidate. The media is lazy. When in the reality of it is, you have a bunch of coaches that are trying to figure everything out. Dabo Swinney would fall under that. Ryan Day would fall under that as well. Coaches that have kind of figured it out. Look at Mike Norvell. Look at Dan Lanning. Look at Lane Kiffin. Even look at Steve Sarkisian. To get Texas from where they were into the playoff in such a short order, even with all the resources that Texas has, is not worth glossing over. Now, Kirby Smart, he's the man right now. He is the alpha dog of college football. But what Kalen DeBoer and Dabo Swinney and all that, they're in there because of what has been done in the past or what they did in the past, even though it might not be that impressive. Washington playing for a national championship, that's the reason Kalen DeBoer is in there at number 2. If you look at the best coaches in college football, according to ESPN, Lance Leopold, I have no problem with that. He has Kansas relevant. But, he's in about the right spot. Kyle Whittingham, he has a career achievement medal coming his way. But Mike Norvell, Dan Lanning, and Lane Kiffin are probably the dudes that have maximized this the most, which means Lane Kiffin should be up higher. If Ole Miss goes to a home playoff game this year, okay, if Ole Miss goes to a home playoff game this year, and I'm not saying that that's the end result of what can happen. I'm not saying Ole Miss can't win the SEC, so don't hear that. I'm talking about the bottom level for this to happen. Lane Kiffin becomes the second or third best coach in college football. I'm not joking. Lane Kiffin wins 10 games. Again, 3 out of 4 years at Ole Miss, he becomes the second best college football coach. There's no getting around it. ESPN can look at blue blood status, and they can do this thing where they always just prop up the Alabama coach and other coaches like Dabo Swinney, who was really good as a football coach in 2017 and 2018. Nobody's taking that away from him. But if this is a poll based off of what is now, that is factually incorrect. There is not a top 10 list right now that Dabo Swinney would be on. There's not. He's too anti-NIL. He's too anti-transfer portal. And those antiquated rules and recruiting and things like that means that Clemson is a difficult job to handle, and it's self-inflicted wounds, which would keep Dabo Swinney off this list. Lane Kiffin has a chance to be the number 2 college football coach after this year. The baseline, the bottom line is Ole Miss hosting a playoff game. Ole Miss gets 10 wins in 3 out of 4 years. That is special territory. That is a situation where people open up the media guide, if there are media guides in 50 years, but they open that up and say, hey, this period right here and this 1959 team through 1962, the 2 glory periods of Ole Miss football. And that is why Lane Kiffin deserves all of his plaudits, all of his, quote, flowers for everything that he's done. And ESPN needs to recognize what is happening in Oxford, Mississippi as well. Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen of the day. We talk with John Macon Gillespie next about these weird Grove Bowl games and spring football in just a bit. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. It has a vast network of more than 1 billion professionals, which makes it the best place to hire. It gives you access to these professionals that you just can't get anywhere else. It does all of that while making the process easy and intuitive. Hiring's easy when you have that many qualified candidates. So easy, in fact, that 86% of small businesses will get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. It's no different than hiring a football coach, hiring a stock person for your team. If you hire the right guy, in 3 years, he'll have a quantitatable and measurable impact on your business and possibly have you in the conversation for the playoff. If you hire the wrong guy in 3 years, you're going to be doing it again. The difference is in your business, if you hire the wrong person, you could be doing this again in 3 weeks. 2.5 small businesses using LinkedIn for hiring cannot be wrong. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/LOCKEDONCOLLEGE to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down all the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of the streaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't-miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 from YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. John Macon Gillespie from the Grove Report joining the show like he did last Monday. He's going to do it this Monday again, and who knows if this becomes a thing. We might just make it a thing moving forward. How are we doing, John?
Doing pretty well. Obviously, no Ole Miss baseball today as we're recording this, but just been kind of watching the Braves a little bit today, kind of taking it easy as much as I can. So
yeah, there's something going on. Spencer Strider getting UCL problems. I mean, that's got to be devastating for a Braves fan. But everybody's saying that this is the pitch clock's problem and not a problem with players trying to throw 103 miles an hour every pitch is disingenuous at best.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe the pitch clock plays a role, but Spencer also added a curveball this offseason that some people are speculating, maybe that played a little bit of a role because he's not really used to that. But I don't know. He'll get reevaluated here in the near future, and I personally think he's probably done for the year, but that's just my guess.
Yeah, and if he has to have Tommy John, there'll be a second Tommy John. Yes.
Yeah.
So tough break either way. In the first segment of the show, by the way, John, we talked about how Lane Kiffin was rated like the number 8 coach by ESPN in college football. And I actually talked about how that's actually disrespecting the job that Lane Kiffin has done over the past few years in this era of NIL and the transfer portal and all this chaos. Lane Kiffin, Mike Norvell, and probably Dan Lanning, outside of Kirby Smart, have probably handled it the best.
Yeah, I think so. I do think Lane was too low on this list. Obviously, he's a top 10 coach. I mean, being on the list is a big deal, period, I guess. But I do think he was too low, especially with some of the names that came above him. Based on how he's been able to, based on how he's been able to navigate the transfer portal, NIL, all these things. I mean, one, you can see the results yourself as a fan just from what Ole Miss has been able to put together. But two, I mean, they call themselves experts, I guess, in this new world of NIL and transfer portal, are pretty much unanimously saying that Ole Miss is handling this about as well as any school can. And Lane Kiffin's a huge part of that. I mean, he's been very inventive in his approach, not just to recruiting, but in NIL efforts as well. And so, yeah, I think he should have landed in the top 5 in this. I mean, Kirby Smart is Kirby Smart. I have no qualms about that being number 1. But yeah,
Kalen DeBoer should be nowhere near number 2.
I don't really see that, and I understand the job he's done previously, but I'm still in kind of a wait and see mode with him at Alabama because one, it's just very difficult to follow the greatest coach of all time, and two, the SEC is still a different animal. I don't care if you've had success elsewhere or not. To me, the SEC is a different animal, and he may be wildly successful at Alabama. I don't know, but I'm still in wait and see mode. I think it's a little early to have him at number 2.
All right, let's change gears just a little bit and talk about the spring game. The Ole Miss is having a weird Grove Bowl games type thing that's modeled after the Pro Bowl games. To my knowledge, Ole Miss is the only school doing this. This is a situation to where I can see both sides of it, John. I understand with the transfer portal opening up 2 days after the spring game. I understand with injury concerns, and maybe this is a banged up football team. I get every bit of that. But this at its heart feels like just another example of the powers that be taking football away from the people that are paying for these players.
Yeah, I mean, and it is, I do see both sides of it, okay, because I think coming into the spring, or I guess really after Christmas, I think a lot of fans have been kind of looking forward to the Grove Bowl, seeing some of these new faces in a scrimmage setting. I do understand that. The flip side, I also fully understand, because with so many new faces and you've just been through spring, I don't think this staff necessarily puts a huge emphasis on spring practice anyway. Personally, I think that if they didn't have to have it, they wouldn't have it. So I understand that, wanting to be as healthy as you can going into the summer. I fully get that. It is going to be weird though, because we are used to scrimmage type spring games and getting really, I know spring games are watered down, but really having some takeaways from stuff like that, that we kind of build narratives on, going into the summer, whether they're right or wrong, we do that. We'll get to see kind of what the formats of these competitions look like. I don't think they've put out details on that yet that I've seen. But yeah, it's going to be different. And kind of like you said, I do see both sides of it. But it's going to be weird for sure.
Yeah. And, looking at this, I guess you have to go into it and find out, like, what can you take from this game? And I guess if it's a 7-on-7, we know about the 7-on-7 part. Obviously, we'll get to see Trey Harris versus Trey Amos. We'll get to see at least a little bit of Kedrick or Scott Ricino in the pass game. Maybe Austin Simmons throwing the football. And, this isn't just a home run that everybody wanted to do it, because not to mention any names, I heard from one or two parents over the course of the weekend that they got kind of taken back from this and now are likely, they might not even come up and see it, because this was an opportunity for them to see their kid and kind of a, for lack of a better word, a coming out party at Ole Miss. And they were a little bit upset. And it's kind of weird, John, but I kind of had to talk them down. It's like, listen, these are the reasons why. This isn't something willy-nilly that's happening. But yeah, they're again, Lane Kiffin has thrived in the chaos, and this is another example of chaos.
And honestly, if this goes well, not necessarily from a fan attendance standpoint, but like I'm talking injury wise and stuff like that, and if it's kind of fun, I wouldn't be surprised if other schools kind of follow suit with this, honestly, in the years ahead, just because of the injury factor. It's another inventive approach, I guess, and we'll just kind of have to see what the takeaways, kind of how it plays out, how it feels a little bit. I don't know that we'll learn much from it, honestly, but
No.
It's still an event, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think that Ole Miss missed an opportunity this year to charge $10 a head to get in just a watered down scrimmage similar to a year ago, but $10 a head and all the proceeds go into the Grove Collective. That seems like a home run slam dunk way, even in a spring game, to clear $100,000.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. And spring game attendance at most places, Ole Miss included, is never great. But even if you are charging money, fans have that extra incentive in this scenario of, hey, your money goes into the NIL collective. And unless I'm misreading something, it seems like most fans are kind of jumping at just about any opportunity they can to contribute in some form, and they get something in return for this, and that's getting to see some of these new faces on the field. So that is a good idea. But I do think that they probably made this call for injury purposes. That's just my gut assumption.
Yeah, I think portal purposes as well, because make no mistake that this is going to be recorded by absolutely everybody on the SEC Network Plus.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Still more to come on the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Chris Beard honestly does the right thing and turns down Arkansas's overtures, and Ole Miss's baseball season is in the danger zone. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the local sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Be part of history. John, on Friday's show, basically everybody kind of was in a holding pattern. Every analyst and their sister was talking about Arkansas coming after Chris Beard. That was all the smoke that was going on. So we couldn't ignore it. We had to talk about it. But my take Friday was Ole Miss did something for Chris Beard that nobody has done. And that was they got him at a point where he got a chance at the lowest part of his life. And that was an advantage that I thought Ole Miss had in this situation, because I do genuinely think that Chris Beard is a thoughtful person, that Chris Beard is an appreciative person. And because of that, I figured that Keith Carter had an advantage over anything that Arkansas could do.
I think that's probably accurate. And you're right. Friday was kind of a weird day. And Thursday too, I suppose. But that whole saga. I mean, I think since it wasn't football related, I don't know that it was as big of a deal for the fan base in their minds. But I mean, it was still very much talked about how another SEC program is coming after a really marquee coach that Ole Miss has its hands on. My biggest takeaway from this was that Keith Carter basically did it again. First, a year or two ago, it was Lane and Auburn. Now being able to fend off Arkansas, which I even wrote this, Arkansas is a really, really good basketball program. Just from a program perspective, they're solid. So to be able to fight off a program like that has historically had more success than Ole Miss, I think tells a lot about, one, Keith's investment into the men's basketball program, which, duh, because he's Keith Carter. But two, the overall perception of Ole Miss's athletic department that has changed over what, maybe the last 10 years, 5, 6, 7 years even. It's really moved in a positive direction, and I may be reading too much into it, but that was my biggest thing, was that, Keith Carter once again stepped up to the plate and he was able to get the job done.
Yeah, Keith Carter was able to step up the plate and get the job done. And the Arkansas search, they got turned down by the coach at Kansas State, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
But the search right now, I believe on Sunday, Chris Jans from Mississippi State interviewed up in Fayetteville, which leads us to a different thing with the transfer portal window open. Could it be Josh Hubbard's season?
Yeah, that's I know something that I've seen a couple places on the old Twitter machine. That's going to be the story within the story a little bit, if that were to play out that way. And what, I don't know if poetic is the right word, but it would very much be almost like a storybook kind of situation for Ole Miss a little bit, if that's how it played out. And I don't know how serious the talks necessarily between Chris Jans and Arkansas are or are not, but it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Even though Chris Beard's out of the running, pulling himself out of it at Arkansas, that's a potential Ole Miss, piece of yarn that fans can kind of keep a track on.
Yeah, and I think that this week we'll start to hear some names in the transfer portal as this goes on. And like I said, if Jans ends up at Arkansas, and if he interviewed in Fayetteville, I mean, he's probably gone at that point, because when you hear a Power 5 coach interviewing, it's kind of over, because when they're not, you end up with those stories like Bianco and LSU a couple of years ago. And it's hard to get over those issues.
It is. And obviously I think Mike eventually found the correct formula to get over it, which was
win the national title,
holding up a trophy in Omaha. And it made suddenly a lot of people forgot about that,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, I do, just for covering my own self. I say I don't necessarily know where it stands, but it looks like he's definitely deep in it.
Speaking of Mike Bianco and everything, Ole Miss got swept over the weekend. They're now 3-9 in the Southeastern Conference, and they honestly need a sweep against Mississippi State and Oxford, and they have not beaten Mississippi State and Oxford since like 2015 or something like that. And that kind of lets you know exactly what level of danger zone this baseball season is in.
Yeah, it's not good. Obviously, our access to things over the weekend with them being in Fayetteville was a little limited. But it doesn't take rocket science to figure out that this baseball team is in a really, really tough spot right now. Getting swept at home by Kentucky still looms really large, because obviously, I don't think the expectation going in was that you're going to win the series in Fayetteville. If you do, fine, whatever. But getting swept by Kentucky, I think, put them so behind the 8 ball as far as momentum is concerned that, they put up a little bit of a fight in Fayetteville, but it really didn't shock anyone, I don't think, that they left there without a win.
They were ninth inning battle in Tennessee away from 3 straight sweeps.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a good situation. And Mississippi State coming to town, sure. You get to come back home and everything, but historically, since really over the last 8 or 9 years, Ole Miss has not done well against Mississippi State on the diamond. So, and I know that people can say, okay, well, these kids weren't around for that, and all those kind of things. But to me, historical trends like that mean something, just because of talk and mindset and stuff like that. So I don't write it off, even though Andrew Fisher was not on the 2017 Ole Miss baseball team. I think there's still something to that, and I think this is going to be definitely a tough hill to climb for this group.
And right before we record it, just to change the subject again real quick, Ole Miss did add a commitment from Daphne, Alabama edge Talib Graham. He's a 6'2", 240-pound prospect. Randall Joyner was the first person that tweeted out the shark, which tells me that he is probably a defensive end type player at the next level. Look at that. What do you know about Talib Graham?
As far as personally, not a lot. I've seen his numbers, and his numbers are pretty impressive. I do know that he was originally playing in Arizona, if I have that correct, before coming to Daphne, Alabama. I think his size is really nice. I haven't seen any film on him yet. I haven't had time to be able to kind of dig into that. But, I think as far as if size is any indication, I think he projects really well. And Randall Joyner definitely seems excited.
Thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We have the most perspective surrounding spring practice. It's probably one of the many reasons we're the number one Ole Miss podcast out there, and thank you for that. But for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today and their first Locked On streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the Free Fire TV channels app. We want to thank John Macon Gillespie for joining us today. Thank you very much, man. And if you're on YouTube, we'll send you that Locked On Sports Today live stream right now. Hotty toddy, everyone.